Turn our attention now back to a domestic issue that I know is keeping our farmers awake at night. I mentioned it at the beginning of the program. This is Labor's imposition of huge transmission lines and renewable projects right across prime agricultural land. I've written about this in the Herald Sun tonight, and it'll be up in the paper tomorrow. The number of wind turbines that I saw scattered throughout southern Italy when I was there a couple of weeks back is just staggering. Now, much of this seems a violation of property rights. You've now got the Labor Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, saying, well, we might have to intervene more strongly to make sure that we can get planning assistance for these projects to get up. You've got this Meadow Creek project in northeast Victoria, which might go ahead without the government considering soil and waterway protection. It's a huge project in a beautiful part of Victoria. Joining me to discuss this, the Shadow Minister for the Environment, Jonathon Duniam. Jonathon, good to talk to you again. What did you make of that Chalmers address yesterday? And when you pick it apart, do you, like me, think that's him saying, OK, we're going to have to override some planning issues here to get this stuff up and running?
I think that's spot on, Steve. I mean, the reality is this government have got some pretty ideologically backed goals that they're going to see through to completion, no matter what the cost. You only have to go and talk to farmers to understand how concerned they are about what is an impending David and Goliath battle, not only in Victoria, but you go to Chalumban in Queensland, and we've got various projects right across the country facing the same sort of future, and farmers very concerned about their ability to do business. And of course, the increased cost of produce getting passed on to the consumer. All of this could be resolved, at least to some degree, if Labor and the Greens stopped blocking our inquiry into these matters in the Senate. You know, we want to have a good look at what's actually going on here, but Labor and the Greens certainly don't want the world to know what they're up to.
Jonathon, there was a bit of a victory down in Tassie, your part of the world, during the week, with the local community managing to get a wind farm project cancelled, which they didn't want on that beautiful part of the northwest coast of Tassie. We have to take some heart out of that.
Well, look, I suppose community activism is an important part of all of this. You know, we come from a renewable state down here in Tassie. We've got a lot of hydro and a bit of wind, not much solar because the sun doesn't shine that much here. But look, community have a very strong view about these projects, and particularly up the northwest, we've seen a lot of opposition to projects up there. There are places for these projects to occur, but to put all our eggs in one basket and not focus on the need for reliability and cheap power, I think is a complete mistake. And we're seeing more and more of this from state and federal governments across the country.
Well, I don't think average Australians yet have woken up. Farming groups have, and the National Farmers Federation now, Jonathon, are running a very strong campaign saying, look, what we do best is grow food. And if you're going to increase our population to the rate that the Albanese government is, with 500,000 immigrants coming into the country, then what we have to do is keep growing food and not turn prime agricultural land over to these massive projects. That one I mentioned up near Millawa in the northwest of Victoria, that's a 540 hectare solar farm on prime growing land. That's up in the King Valley, which is famous for its grape production. I mean, how closely do governments have to look at this stuff? And look, you could be in power after the next election. How close do you seriously believe we're going to be by 2030 to net zero?
Oh, look, I mean, and this back to Jim Chalmers for a point there. His speech about all of this, I thought it was interesting that he focused on the government not reaching its commitment on net zero by the appointed time in the future, but no reference at all to the cost of electricity, the promise they made to bring power prices down by $275 a year for each household. No reference to that at all. So it speaks volumes about their priorities and where they're focused at the moment. But in terms of government overreach and them pursuing these projects this way, I mean, seriously, we do need to look at what we're doing here. Turning prime ag land, when we do want to grow our population, as you say, into solar panel arrays or wind farms is, I think, a disaster. Much in the same way as shutting down our forestry industry is. When we're going to try and build 30,000 new homes, what are we going to build them out of? Concrete and steel? Because we're not going to be able to cut down trees to build timber frames for houses. This is the madness of these inner city, ideologically based policies that Labor, state and federal, are pursuing at the expense of economic activity in our regions and indeed our states too.
Yeah, spot on. And I mentioned that I had been in Europe recently. I mean, you drive through France. France has got 54 nuclear reactors powering France. And that's what they rely on mainly for their power. Yes, they've got some renewables, but they have a suite of things. You know, Tassie's lucky enough to have your hydro, but you still do need gas. I mean, we need to use everything we've got, don't we? I mean, why would you give up as a country one of the great assets, which is we've got coal, we've got gas, we've got uranium for nuclear energy, we've got water, we've got sun, we've got wind. Why not use it all?
Spot on. It makes no sense to draw a big red line through one particular source of energy generation just because you've got an ideological opposition to it. And I keep using that word, ideology. It's not fact-based, it's not science-based, this opposition. The world's moved on from Chernobyl. Technology has improved. There isn't a country out there. If we go back to Jim Chalmers' holy grail of net zero at whatever the cost, there is no country out there with a credible pathway to net zero that doesn't have nuclear as part of the mix. What's more, there's no country out there that has a pathway to cheaper, more reliable power that doesn't have nuclear as part of the mix. So to rule it out, but put all our eggs in the renewable basket at the expense of everything else, I think is just, as I said before, absolute policy madness. It'll appease the Greens, it'll appease those who live in inner cities and don't care how much power costs, but it will not do anything for our economy and particularly for people in our regions, the backbone of our economy.
Well said, Jonathon. Good to catch up with you again. Jonathon Duniam,